I swear, sometimes life just tosses you these weird little moments that seem totally random until you realize they were exactly what you needed. Like the time a delivery guy showed up at my apartment, but instead of handing me my order, he hesitated, smiled, and then, get this, deliberately got the address wrong. I mean, who does that? And why? That night ended up being one of those weird, unexpected turns that changed how I looked at everything, especially him. Okay, let me back up a bit. I work from home most days, so ordering food is kind of my social life. Not the healthiest, I know, but hey, it's honest. This particular evening, I'd gone all out and ordered sushi from this little spot across town. The kind of place with no reviews, but killer rave on Instagram stories. I was starving. The doorbell rang right on time, and I buzzed myself downstairs to grab the food. The guy at the door was maybe mid-20s, wearing the standard delivery uniform. Nothing special, honestly, but there was this weird sort of hesitation in his eyes, like he wasn't just trying to hand over a box and go. When I gave him my name, he glanced down at the phone in his hand, then back up, and said, "Hey, actually, I think there's been a mix-up. This order's got the wrong address." I figured maybe the app glitched, or he was trying to save himself a trip. I started to tell him to double-check, but he already had this half smile and said, "Or maybe I could just drop it off at a nearby place. It's, closer to where I'm headed." That's when I realized he wasn't just a delivery guy following instructions. There was something else going on. I asked, "What's the address?" He looked up, eyes catching mine, like he was gauging how I'd react. "Just a couple doors down," he said. "Trust me, it's the right place for this order." I was confused, but curious, and honestly, a bit amused. "Who pulls this?" So I shrugged and said, "All right, lead the way." We walked together down the hall, and when he opened the door, it wasn't some random apartment. It was his place, cozy, cluttered with plants and books, warm light spilling out. He set the sushi on the kitchen counter and finally introduced himself properly. "I'm Jamie." And just like that, what started as a weird delivery mishap turned into the kind of night where you forget the clock, the cold outside, and just listen. I didn't know it then, but Jamie was going to shake up everything I thought I knew about chance encounters, about trust, about what it means to show up for someone in the smallest, weirdest ways. I mean, who deliberately gets an address wrong just to deliver sushi in person? Only one way to find out. Jamie had this easy confidence about him, like he wasn't just some random delivery guy, but someone who'd seen enough weirdness in life to not sweat the small stuff. I noticed the way his fingers brushed over the sushi box, like he was making sure the seaweed wrap was still intact, and suddenly it hit me. This was more than just dropping off a meal. Maybe he did mess up on purpose, but it wasn't to be annoying. It felt like he wanted to make a connection, weird as that sounds. I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms, trying to play it cool, but honestly, I was already hooked by the way he smiled when he talked about the weirdest sushi spots he'd stumbled upon around the city. You ever try that place on 9th? The one that makes sushi with, like, smoked eel and some crazy wasabi sauce? It's insane, Jamie said, eyes lighting up like he was about to tell me some secret. Can't say I have, I admitted. I'm pretty basic when it comes to sushi. California rolls, maybe spicy tuna. He laughed, a sound that was equal parts amused and warm. Man, you've got to live a little. Sushi's an adventure, not just a snack. I found myself smiling back, feeling a little spark of excitement I hadn't gotten from a delivery interaction in, like forever. We sat down at his little kitchen table, and he pulled out a couple of beers from a mini fridge. "You want one?" "I promise I'm not trying to trap you here. I just hate eating alone sometimes." And in that moment, I realized maybe that was why he got the address wrong. Not to mess with me, but because he wanted company. A random guy, maybe even a stranger, to share something small but real with. We cracked open the beers and started talking about stuff that usually doesn't come up in small talk. Music we loved, bad dates we'd survived, the weird quirks about living in the city. There was something disarmingly genuine about Jamie, like he'd been waiting for someone to just listen without judgment. I wanted to be that someone. The night stretched on, and I forgot I was technically just a customer. We swapped stories and jokes, the kind that make you feel like you've known someone way longer than an hour. When he showed me a tattoo on his forearm, a small compass rose, I could see the subtle way he lit up, talking about his love for travel and the places he hoped to see one day. I felt the kind of pull you get when you know something's about to change, but you don't want to admit it yet. I could tell Jamie felt it too, the way his gaze lingered just a second longer than it should, the little pauses between our sentences growing heavier, like we both knew we were skirting the edge of something. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the sushi place. Your order was delivered. I glanced down at the box in front of us and realized it was exactly the same as what I'd ordered. But somehow, it felt different here. Like the sushi wasn't just food anymore. It was the start of a story neither of us expected. Jamie caught me looking at the receipt and grinned. Funny how a little delivery mix-up can change your night, huh? I laughed softly, nodding. Yeah, never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you got the address wrong. He shrugged, eyes twinkling. Sometimes the wrong turn is the right one. I was about to say something when the apartment door opened suddenly, and a guy about Jamie's age peeked into the room. For a second, I tensed up, wondering if I was intruding or if Jamie had some complicated situation I hadn't picked up on. But the guy smiled broadly and waved at me. Hey, sorry to drop in like this, he said, stepping inside. You're Jamie's friend, right? Jamie nodded, a bit flushed. Yeah, this is Mark. Mark, this is the guy who got my sushi order but came inside anyway. Mark laughed, shaking my hand. Glad you didn't run off. Jamie can be pretty persuasive. I realized then that there was this whole other side to Jamie, a life that seemed a little messy, but also full of people who cared about him. And honestly, that made me like him even more. We all ended up sitting around the kitchen, talking and joking, and the initial awkwardness melted away like it never existed. I could tell Jamie was comfortable with Mark, but the way he looked at me during the conversation, those subtle glances, made me think maybe there was room for something new. Later, when Mark left, Jamie and I stayed on the couch, the night quieting down except for the hum of the city outside. I felt this strange mix of nerves and calm settle over me. It was like I was standing on the edge of something, but I didn't want to step back. So, I said, breaking the silence, "Do you always get the address wrong on purpose?" He smirked, looking way too pleased with himself. Only for the deliveries, I want to turn into something a little more interesting. I shook my head, laughing. Your trouble. He leaned forward, eyes locking with mine. Only the good kind. And just like that, the weird delivery mishap turned into a night I couldn't stop thinking about. The kind of night that makes you hope for a second chance at something unexpected. Because sometimes, the wrong address is exactly where you're supposed to be. I sat there for a moment, the silence stretching comfortably between us, maybe for the first time that night. Jamie's smirk softened into something a little more vulnerable, a flicker in his eyes that told me he wasn't just joking around. It was like he was daring me to step closer to see if I'd catch him. All right, I said, finally. You got me curious. Why'd you actually do it? The wrong address thing. I mean, was it just because you hated eating alone, or is there something else? He shrugged, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I don't know. I guess sometimes you get stuck in this rhythm, right? Just delivering orders, always the same, never really connecting with anyone. I thought maybe if I stumbled across someone open to a little randomness, it'd shake things up. And, well, here you are. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Man, that's kind of romantic in a totally weird delivery guy way. Jamie grinned. Hey, I'm full of surprises. I wanted to believe that, because something about him felt like a break from all the usual. Work, Netflix, ordering food alone. This was messy and unpredictable, but that was the charm. We talked until the early hours, the city outside quiet except for the faint hum of distant sirens and the occasional car. Jamie shared stories about growing up in a small town, coming out, and moving to the city to find his own path. I opened up about my own awkward stumbles in the dating world, the heartbreaks disguised as bad Tinder dates, and the loneliness of trying to figure it all out. At some point I realized we'd moved to the couch, sitting closer than before. His hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I let it linger, the small contact sending a rush through me like a spark jumping a wire. "Hey," he said quietly, eyes searching mine. "Yeah?" I whispered back. "I'm glad you didn't just take your sushi and bolt." Neither did I admitted. It felt like stepping into uncharted territory, but it was one of those moments where you just know. The air shifted, heavier now, charged with possibility. Then, without thinking too much, I leaned in, closing the gap between us. His lips met mine softly, tentative at first, like he was testing the waters. But it wasn't long before the kiss deepened, becoming something warmer, more urgent. I felt all the awkwardness and hesitation from earlier melt away. When we pulled apart, breathless, Jamie rested his forehead against mine. "I'm glad I messed up your delivery." "Me too," I said, smiling. The next few days were a blur of texts that started off just polite and quickly turned into something more. We'd find excuses to meet up. Coffee runs, late night walks, or just hanging out with no real plan other than wanting to be near each other. It was easy, natural, like we'd found a secret rhythm that nobody else knew about. But, of course, nothing is ever that simple. One afternoon, as I was waiting for Jamie at a little cafe near my place, he showed up looking a bit worn around the edges. His usual grin was there, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "What's up?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's just, work has been crazy. Like, real crazy. And my roommate, Mark? Things have been tense between us lately." I frowned. "Tense? What happened?" Jamie hesitated, then shrugged. "Nothing huge. Just people get complicated. Sometimes you realize friends aren't always the people you thought they were." We sat there in silence for a minute, the noise of the cafe filling the space. I wanted to say something reassuring, but the truth was, I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that Jamie needed someone in his corner, and I wanted to be that guy. "Hey," I said finally, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You're not alone in this, okay? I'm here." He looked up, a flicker of gratitude lighting his eyes. "Thanks. That means a lot." We spent the rest of the afternoon wandering through the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing, that easy banter we'd built over the last week. It was like each day peeled away a little more of the guard both of us kept up. One night, Jamie invited me over for dinner. Not a delivery this time, but something he cooked himself. I was impressed, honestly. The kitchen smelled amazing, and he was surprisingly good at making pasta. As we ate, the conversation turned more personal. Jamie told me about the fears he had, of failing, of being stuck, of never really finding a place where he belonged. I told him about the loneliness that sometimes crept in even when I was surrounded by people. It was raw and real, the kind of conversation you don't expect to have with someone you met because of a sushi delivery gone sideways. Later, as we sat on his couch with the lights dimmed, I realized that this strange, accidental meeting had turned into something important, something neither of us had planned, but both of us needed. Jamie reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thanks for sticking around, even when things got messy." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "You're worth it." The city buzzed softly outside his window, but in that moment, all I wanted was to stay right there, with Jamie, in the middle of the chaos and the quiet. Two people who found something real when the address went wrong. A few weeks slipped by like that, slow, easy, and full of these small, perfect moments. We fell into a rhythm without really trying, like we'd found a secret language only we understood. Morning texts that turned into late-night calls, sharing bad jokes and good music, and the way Jamie's hand always found mine when we walked down the street. But life, of course, isn't only made up of quiet nights and hand-holding. There were days when I could tell Jamie was still carrying some weight. His phone would buzz and his smile would falter, or he'd zone out mid-conversation like his mind was somewhere else entirely. One evening, I was over at his place, sprawled on the couch watching some terrible action movie we were both pretending to enjoy. Jamie kept glancing at his phone, an unread message blinking on the screen. Finally, he sighed and flipped the phone over. "I should probably deal with that." I didn't push, but the tension hung in the air. After a minute, Jamie looked up, eyes serious. "It's Mark again." I nodded, remembering the roommate he'd mentioned before. "You want to talk about it?" He ran a hand through his hair and looked away. "Yeah, things have been rough. Mark and I, we used to be close, almost like brothers. But lately, it feels like we're just sharing space and nothing else. There's been some stuff, money, personal stuff, that's driving a wedge between us." "That sounds tough," I said, squeezing his hand gently. Jamie laughed bitterly. "Yeah, and it's not even the big stuff that hurts, it's the little things, you know? The silence, the cold stares, pretending everything's fine when it's not." I wanted to say the right thing, but honestly, I just pulled him closer. "You don't have to go through that alone, Jamie. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." He leaned into me, and for a moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lessen. But I knew this wasn't going to be solved with a hug or a few kind words. The next day, Jamie called Mark. I was sitting with him when the conversation started, and I could feel the tension so thick it was almost physical. Voices were low but sharp, and the usual easy humor between them was gone. After the call, Jamie looked drained. "It's complicated. I don't know if we can patch things up or if it's time to just move on." I didn't want him to feel like he had to make that decision alone, so I offered, "If you need a place to crash, you know mine's open." He smiled, grateful but hesitant. "Thanks, I might take you up on that." That night, we stayed up late talking about what moving on really meant. It wasn't just about Mark or the apartment. It was about Jamie's whole journey, the fear of losing people, the hope for new beginnings. "I've been scared," he admitted quietly. "Scared that I'll keep messing things up, that I'm just chasing something I'll never have." I looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability. "Jamie, no one's perfect. But you're not alone anymore. You've got me." He smiled, a little shaky but real. "I'm glad." A few days later, Mark packed up and moved out. The place felt emptier, but Jamie seemed lighter, like a storm had passed. With Mark gone, Jamie and I spent more time together, carving out a space that felt like ours. We went to late-night diners, explored hidden corners of the city, and even took a weekend trip to the beach. For the first time in a long while, Jamie talked about dreams that didn't feel out of reach. One evening, while we sat watching the sunset from his balcony, Jamie turned to me and said, "You know, getting that order wrong was probably the best screw-up I've ever made." I laughed. "I'm just glad I answered the door that night." He reached for my hand, holding it tight. "Me too." Sometimes, I think about how a little randomness, a simple wrong turn, can lead you exactly where you're supposed to be. And with Jamie, I finally understood that real connection isn't about perfect plans or flawless timing. It's about being willing to take a chance and show up, even when the address isn't quite right. The weeks that followed felt like we were slowly building something that, honestly, I hadn't realized I was missing. It was the kind of companionship that didn't scream for attention, but settled quietly between us. Familiar, warm, like the soft hum of a late-night radio station you didn't expect to love, but can't stop listening to. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Jamie invited me over to help him organize his place. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I showed up with a couple of beers and a promise to make the day as painless as possible. His apartment was a mess in the way that felt lived in, not chaotic, but like a place where stories had piled up in every corner. There were stacks of books leaning against the wall, a few houseplants wilting on the windowsill, and that faint smell of coffee and old vinyl records. "Don't judge," Jamie said with a grin as he handed me a box labeled miscellaneous. "Judging? Nah, this just means I get to know you better." "Like your own kind of archaeological dig," I joked, setting down my beer. We spent the afternoon sorting through old letters, photos, and random souvenirs. Every once in a while, Jamie would pause, holding up some random object and telling me what it meant. A ticket stub from a concert he loved, a postcard from a trip he took with his family, a broken watch that he swore had stopped right when something important happened. It was in those moments I realized how much of himself he was willing to share without saying it out loud, and I was soaking it all in. At some point, we found ourselves sitting on the floor, surrounded by piles of memories. Jamie leaned back against the couch, sighing deeply. You know, he said, organizing this stuff feels kind of like sorting out my own head. I nodded. Sometimes cleaning up the outside helps clear the inside. He looked at me, eyes softening. There's a lot I'm still figuring out. About who I am, what I want, even with you. I swallowed, feeling the gravity of his words. Hey, I'm figuring this out too. No one has it all together. Jamie smiled, but then his expression shifted, like he was wrestling with something not quite ready to come out. Do you ever feel like you're scared of being happy? He asked quietly. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, maybe. It's weird, isn't it? Like you want something, but then you're afraid it'll break or disappear. He nodded slowly. Exactly. I spent so long building walls, convincing myself I'm fine alone, but now I don't want to be. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You don't have to be. For a while, we just sat there. No need for more words. The rain drummed softly against the window, the kind of sound that makes you want to stay exactly where you are. Eventually, Jamie broke the silence. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. I looked up, heart picking up pace. He took a deep breath. The night I got your address wrong. It wasn't just because I wanted company. I was nervous, scared even. I liked you from the moment I saw you. I didn't know how to say it, so I messed up the delivery on purpose, to find a reason to see you again. For a second, everything else faded. That confession hit me harder than I expected. I liked you too, I said honestly. From that moment, Jamie's grin returned, a bit sheepish, but full of relief. Good, because I was hoping this wasn't just me imagining things. I laughed softly. Not at all. We leaned in, a little more certain now, letting the moment stretch between us. The kind of moment that feels like the start of something bigger, something real. Over the next few days, things shifted subtly. We began talking about the future, what we wanted, what scared us, what made us hopeful. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and uncertainty, but we faced them together. One night, as we lay tangled up on his couch, Jamie looked at me and said, You know, I never believed in fate before, but now I think maybe some mistakes are meant to happen. I smiled, brushing my fingers through his hair. Yeah, like a wrong delivery turning into the right kind of story. He chuckled, pulling me closer. Exactly. And as I looked at him, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The quiet, steady hope that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with the person you never expected to find. It wasn't long before the quiet comfort we'd found in each other started to grow into something more vivid, more alive. Like the difference between hearing a song on the radio and hearing it live. Raw, unpredictable, and unforgettable. One evening, Jamie called me out of the blue. His voice was hesitant, almost shy, which was so unlike him it caught me off guard. Hey, he said, are you free tonight? I was thinking maybe we could go out, like not just chill at my place or order takeout, actually go somewhere. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. Sure, somewhere fancy or just somewhere. He laughed softly. Honestly, I don't care. Just want to do something different. We settled on a little wine bar a few blocks from my apartment. It wasn't flashy, but the dim lighting and soft jazz in the background made it feel like the perfect place to step outside our usual routine. When I arrived, Jamie was already there, looking a little nervous but excited. He wore a simple shirt, but somehow he looked like he'd put in more effort than usual, an energy about him that was hard to miss. We ordered a bottle of red and found a quiet corner, the kind that made it easy to talk without shouting over the noise. So, Jamie started, swirling his glass. What's the dream? If you could do anything, no limits, what would that be? I took a moment, watching him settle into his chair, eyes curious and hopeful. I guess I want to feel like this more often, I said, nodding gently toward the space between us. Not just the good nights, but the messy, the confusing, the in-between. I want someone who gets that life isn't perfect, but it's still worth it. He smiled, and I caught a glint in his eyes that said he felt the same way. I think, he said slowly, I'm ready to stop running from that. From feelings, from people, from myself. There was something raw and honest in that admission that made me reach across the table and take his hand. Then, maybe we figure it out together? Jamie squeezed my hand, and the weight of the moment settled over us, both terrifying and thrilling. After a few more glasses of wine and stories shared, we stepped out into the cool night. The city lights blurred around us, but the world felt quieter, like we were in our own little bubble. As we walked, Jamie suddenly stopped and turned toward me. "I'm glad I messed up that delivery," he said softly, eyes searching mine. "Me too," I replied. Then, almost on impulse, he leaned in and kissed me right there on the sidewalk. The kiss was gentle, but full of everything neither of us had said yet. The hope, the fear, the promise. I felt my heart race, the city noise fading into the background. When we finally pulled apart, Jamie grinned. "So," he teased, "does this mean I'm off the hook for future wrong addresses?" I laughed. "You're definitely on the hook for a date number 2. He winked. "Deal." The nights that followed were filled with moments like that. Simple, real, and charged with something neither of us wanted to name just yet. We explored new parts of the city together, tried cooking meals that mostly turned out edible, and shared quiet mornings where nothing needed to be said. But as things grew closer, the reality outside our bubble crept in. Jamie's work schedule got crazier, and old tensions with Mark lingered just beneath the surface of conversations. I could tell Jamie was juggling more than he let on, trying to keep the parts of his life that weren't ready to change separate from what we were building. One Saturday afternoon, as I helped him pack up the last of Mark's things, the silence between us stretched long and heavy. Jamie finally broke it. "You ever feel like life's this constant balancing act? Like you're trying to hold everything together, but the weight keeps shifting?" I nodded, putting down the box I was carrying. "All the time. But maybe it's okay if some things slip. Maybe it's about choosing what to hold on to." He looked at me, eyes searching. "And what about us? What if I'm scared I can't hold on to that?" I stepped closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Then we hold on to each other." A small smile touched his lips, and in that moment, I believed it was true. Life would keep throwing curveballs, no doubt about it. But with Jamie, with this messy, unexpected, wrong-on-purpose delivery guy who somehow became the right person, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes the best things happen when you don't stick to the plan. Sometimes the wrong address leads you home. A few months later, I found myself sitting on Jamie's couch, the late afternoon sun filtering through the curtains and casting a warm glow across the room. We'd learned to navigate the ups and downs, the unpredictable schedules, the moments of doubt. But there was a new kind of calm between us, one built on honesty, and the little choices we made every day to show up for each other. Jamie was in the kitchen, humming softly as he made coffee, and I watched him, feeling this quiet gratitude settle in my chest. It was strange to think that all of this had started because of a deliberately wrong delivery address, that one small, daring choice had opened a door neither of us expected, and somehow we'd walk through it together. He brought the mugs over and sat down beside me, eyes bright with that familiar spark. "You ever think about how differently things could have gone if I'd just done my job and handed you the sushi at your door?" I smiled and shook my head. "Honestly, I don't want to imagine it, because then I wouldn't have met you." Jamie reached out, fingers curling around mine. Me neither. There was a softness in that moment, a feeling of being exactly where we were meant to be. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and steady. We didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Our story was quiet but filled with meaning, a reminder that sometimes the best connections come from the unexpected, from the places where we let go of control and just take a chance. As the city hummed outside, I realized that love, like life, isn't about following the map perfectly. It's about finding someone willing to walk beside you, even if the path leads to a few wrong addresses along the way. And with Jamie, I knew I'd found exactly that.